You need those?
Yeah, good day, Denmark. Since the last 1.5 years, I gave more than 60 speeches. This is even more than all marathons together I run in my life. Speeches are words, and to be honest, I'm almost tired of words. Yes, it is the European way to use words. Thinking, writing, talking. It's always all about words. Politicians, writers, thinkers, lobbyists, leftists and right-wing representatives, and so on, always words. In peaceful times, in times we live together confidential, we are willing to listen words. And of course, in these times, words can be like weapons. They could hit and hurt us, but only in our minds, in our conceptual, rational thinking. In times of Facebook, Twitter, 24-hour television, there are too much words around all the time. Do they really change something? Do they help us against migration crisis? No, because this crisis is real. It is not sufficient to fight it with words. This crisis is so bloody real that the problem can't even be solved by money. But the most important reason, those who are coming, who are attacking our freedom, our values, our way of trustful life, they don't listen. They are not even interested. Islam doesn't want to discuss. Because our words are words of unbelievers. They never learned reflection. It is not even allowed. It is not. Is it okay?
It's okay, I can turn it down a little bit.
It is not even allowed. No thought against the Islamic threefold system of politics, religion, and law is allowed. So we see a conflict between critical thinking and reflection, and on the other side, an Islamic doctrine of politics, moral, religion, and Sharia law. Islamic literature dictates en detail how to deal with non-Muslims. 64% of their content is about standards how to treat unbelievers. It is full of hate speech against unbelievers, against Jews, against Christians, against homosexuals, and against women. Against. The three holy books of Islam are full of against. And Islamic religious education programs even children to submit their own ego unconditionally to the dictates of an authoritarian collective consciousness and to give up any differentiated personality development. It is our European thinking, the quarreling on our values, identities, the deep debates on freedom, freedom of speech. We are trapped in our liberal and humanistic view on the world, and we are trapped in decency. In Islam, there is acting. It's collective praying 5 times a day. It's living the Sharia system, and one result of acting the Muslim way are 1,276 victims of sexual assaults only in Cologne on New Year's Eve. So we also see a conflict between our remaining in words and the acting according to Islam. But again to words. Words are like noise and dust. As a saying in my country says, the leftists, the churches, the media, and the profiteers of migration catastrophe use words without rationality and logic. It's all about feelings, opinions, and ideology. The Western civilization is highly insane, neurotic, and on a suicidal path. It is collective Stockholm syndrome combined with narcissism. And the problem is both psychic disturbances don't cure themselves. It is even worse. Also, narcissism doesn't allow to reflect, to criticize oneself. Because then the huge, blown-up ego balloon, the Western hybris, collapses into a very little and small self-esteem. But also, the Islamic world has a big problem with narcissism. Think about the young, small boys that are circumcised exact in their age when the feeling of shame is growing. Then they are hurt, suffer blood and pain. In my opinion, the Ummah is a collective group of traumatized men. And the women, the mothers who couldn't protect their little sons and even daughters, they generate a huge guilt complex and feel to be punished by men could be right. So they raise their Muslim boys like supersized princes, and narcissism is fueled and going on. So it is also a conflict between traumatized men and two different systems of narcissism. People who ever in their lives had to deal with psychopaths do have an advantage because they already understood that there is nothing to understand in rational terms. And instead of Catholicism and evangelism, we do have two new religions in Europe, the multiculturalism and the welcome culture. Both of them were initiated and are still fueled by the federal governments. It is a top-down strategy, and their politics look exactly like this, because they use means like gender mainstreaming to force us in an unnatural equality between men and women. The means of sexualizing of young children are to break their natural feeling of shame and development. And they created nanny state systems to pretend security and shelter in order to make people dependent. The patriotism, the new conscious of national identities, and the one European identity has to grow bottom up. So there is no wonder that lots of grassroots movements like Pegida in Germany, For Freedom in Denmark, and now Fortress Europe as a pan-European movement are arising all over. And the Britons showed yesterday that liberation is possible. So, rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. And yes, now Britain is our land of hope and glory, mother of the free in Europe. And in this dissolving Western societies, now Islam conquers. The Islamic ideology is not a religion, nor is it a culture. It's in its consistent form, it is a complete 100% owned life system. Islam has religious, legal, political, economical, social, and military components. Islamization begins when there are sufficient Muslims in a country and claim their religious privileges. Today, 1.5 billion Muslims make 22% of the world population. Their birth rates exceed very much those of Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and Jews. End of this century, the Muslims will have exceeded the 50% mark. And still there is no real, honest debate about Islamization of Europe and the causes of the refugee crisis that is actually a migration weapon, a weapon against Europe. And with the support of the churches, Europe is now becoming another continent of Christian and Jewish persecution with full speed. Politics and media don't care. They still deny Islamization of Europe. Why do these politicians not even come to the obvious idea to request the Islamic states to take their asylum-seeking fellow believers? Wealthy countries like Qatar, third place worldwide in terms of GDP per capita, or Kuwait, number 12, the United Arab Emirates, number 19, or the giant Saudi Arabia, number 31. Rather than being blackmailed by Erdogan, the EU should have started long ago negotiations with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. In the OIC, 57 Islamic states are organized with almost 26 million square kilometers of land, which is more than 6.5 times as the entire EU area. There live 1.5 billion inhabitants, which means 10 million refugees there correspond only 0.6% of the total population. Even 100 million fleeing Muslims make within the Islamic world only a migrant quota of 6%. This is almost nothing compared to the approximately 20% migrants in Germany. And most important, there in the Islamic societies, Muslims can be integrated perfectly homogeneous. That would solve at one stroke all the religious conflicts in Europe. So, why are such solution-oriented proposals not discussed at EU level? And it doesn't matter whether we take in 1 million or 5 million or 20 million invaders to Europe. It changed just 0.0% of the poverty in the world. Incidentally, it doesn't matter if there is war in Syria or not. The instability of Islamic world itself is the problem. Almost all states with civil war of the last 10 years have been in Muslim countries. In 2012 alone, there were 6 civil wars worldwide, all found in Islamic states: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. Muslim countries are among the poorest in the world, and Muslim countries have the highest birth rate. This mix of violence, poverty, and population explosion creates a constant migration crisis, a permanent mass migration. And it doesn't matter whether the Syrian war will be finished or not. The influx of invaders from Muslim countries will not stop. Oil is the only asset that brings economic benefits to Muslim countries. But the Muslim world has simply nothing to offer to the rest of the world. Even their old function of bridgehead between Asia and the West is not longer important. There is no social mobility or an exchange of scientific level. And the Islamic world has no chance in a networked world to succeed in the tough competition for the best brains. Highly qualified women will make a big circle around Islamic countries where women are oppressed and not only their rights are curtailed. And the Quran is not allowed to be criticized. How can creative minds arise in this climate, which is a requirement for scientific thesis? Instead, the exploding Muslim population competes for land, power, and wealth. There are only two ways out of it: war or migration. And of course, migration is the better way for them, especially because Germany, Sweden, and Austria, it is made so easy for them to take what they want. Migration is the Muslim economic approach that works well. Anyway, as long as there are enough Europeans who are willing to pay the bill. The best investment of a Muslim is the smuggler penalty. After that, he cashes up our high benefits, which are huge more of what he would earn in his Muslim country by working. And a young Muslim immigrant is the best investment of family clans. As soon as he has got the papers, they start the family reunion. It is a huge organized human trafficking. No wonder that more than 1,000 strong clans now dominate some of our major cities. The Islamic migration of people is an expression of structural problems that are caused by the Muslim world itself. Even countries that are 100% Islamic, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Yemen, will never achieve peace because in those states the most radical Muslims intimidate the less radical Muslims. These wars and conflicts will continue and deliver reasons for flight for millions of people. This million Muslims take the instability of their culture into the West, to Europe. So, by mass migration, no single problem is solved, but the Muslims export their problems, their instability on our continent. The end of civil war in Syria will nothing solve. The Muslim world is full of other trouble spots. We cannot save Muslims from themselves. We can only save us from their violence. The constant Muslim refugee crisis will be our crisis until we lock the door to Europe permanently. And we get serious with the fortress Europe. Dear friends, this modern global mass migration behaves similar to water. It always seeks a new way when it comes up against an obstacle. It is then that one might build a stable, solid dam, a high-tech border fence, for example, with NATO wire in 4 rows, searchlights and border guards. Because 540 million of Africans are on their way to Europe. And Saudi Arabia and also Romania are showing what can be done. The Saudis are protecting themselves against intruders and destabilization with a 900-kilometer border system with ultra-modern electronics, planned and built by Airbus Defence and Space, a European company. In Europe, we are enclosed by an approximately 14,300 kilometer external border. 30 billion euros should be sufficient for the high-tech protection of the EU land frontier. Sea borders can be secured after the Australian model with armed Frontex vessels that return migrants to the coasts of which they have come. Therefore, there are no excuses. The European borders are defendable, even with manageable costs and with European technology. It even creates jobs and safeguards Europe's culture, values and freedom. Therefore, damn it, build this fence around Europe. And this fence can also be the great European project for which everyone is yearning. A project for the collective defense of Europe, which strengthens European self-awareness and identity and binds together the European people. Now, I used a lot of words. Thank you that you listened. But tomorrow we start action. We will meet the civil troops that are supporting the Bulgarian border police. And they are looking for volunteers from Europe because Bulgaria is next to Italy the door entrance for EU Europe. Fortress Europe is going to organize and promote this necessary chance to act. It's time for an European uprising. Let's follow our words and get into action. Now for freedom. Thank you.